stuff you like, you can call me Ursa, and a couple of weeks ago we were talking about The Mummy and how I revelled in its cheesy glory. But I promised you sequels, so sequels we will have. The Mummy Returns was a critical mixed bag, but it did make a crap ton of money, which will be important later. There are a lot of things I like about The Mummy Returns. Imhotep and Axunamun, more Ardith Bay, there are some awesome flashbacks, and there is character development. There is a sense of continuity. Rick and Evie are now a married couple with a young son, and I like that. There are a few, not so much rules as guidelines for making a good sequel. Rule 1. Get as much of your cast and crew back as possible. If you're making a sequel, clearly the first film was a success, and so you want to capture as much of that original magic as possible. Getting the cast back can be crucial to a sequel's success, because otherwise you have to have terrible or unfortunate things happen to the characters off screen in order to explain why they're not there anymore. And audiences don't like that. We don't really mind bad things happening to the characters, in fact that's what makes movies interesting, but we want the bad things to happen to them on the screen, where we can see them. And we want them to sound and act like themselves, to be written in a similar way, by someone who understands their characters and will develop them rather than derailing them. About 9 years after The Mummy, Evelyn is much more confident, Ardith Bay is much nicer, Imhotep gets his previously mentioned love as motivation subplot explored, and Jonathan is Jonathan. Con artist, tricksy and a bit chaotic good, but ultimately a decent human being.
Make me proud.
Today's that day, Evie.
And we introduce a couple of new characters, like Izzy.
I knew it. I'm gonna get shot.
He's fine. And Alex.
My dad is going to kick your ass.
Alex is not a bad addition. As film kids go, he's good and fairly believable. Stupidly brave, perhaps, but that runs in the family. A wonderful asset at a sandcastle competition. And mostly out of the way, leading us to Rule 2. Don't let your new characters hog all of the screen time. New characters are great, but if as a writer you fall in love with them at the expense of your existing characters, then people are bound to get a bit tetchy. To give a Doctor Who example, the companions are super important, but the Doctor, as in Doctor Who, he's in the title, is the linchpin of the story. Russell T Davies fell in love with Rose. Stephen Moffat has fallen in love with River Song, and both of these things are detrimental to the show if you don't like those characters. I feel about River Song the same way that a lot of people felt about Rose. Both of them ultimately became too important to the story, because it's not ultimately about them. Rule 3 of sequels, it's a fine balancing act between seen it before and want more of the same. A bit like pop music, what we want is a fine mix of what we've already been listening to, plus some novelty to keep us interested. And this is where The Mummy Returns falls down. Not because there's not enough of the same, not because there's not enough new stuff, but because they didn't cut anything. It seems like they thought of every single old and new idea that they could, and then they jammed them all together. To quote one of the commenters in my review of The Mummy, the problem with The Mummy Returns is not so much that there are plot holes, as that there are plot chasms. And the main problem with The Mummy Returns is plot. Not the plot holes, not even the plot chasms, because we'll forgive a lot if we're entertained. No, it's the tangled, twisted morass of the myriad plot threads. There are just too many plot threads. There is, bizarrely, just too much plot. And there are many plot holes, like wasn't Evie supposed to be an Axunamun's stand-in for movie 1? And if there are 12 tribes of Medjai, why didn't they just come en masse and kill everybody when they arrived at Hamunaptra the first time? Or indeed the second time? And my personal favourite, people can outrun the rising sun. Come on people, this isn't the frackin' Discworld where light is lazy. This is supposed to be a rough facsimile of the real world, which operates by, the laws of physics. Though judging by some of the action scenes and anything involving the dirigible, a rough facsimile of physics would be about right. And while I'm not excusing that, nobody came into the cinema thinking this was going to be anything other than big, loud and stupid, right? To fully appreciate the sheer weight of plot threads that weigh this movie down, we're gonna need a summary, so bear with me. Evelyn is the reincarnation of Nefertari, daughter of Seti I and protector of the bracelet of Anubis, which used to belong to the Scorpion King after he sold his soul to the devil, I mean Anubis, and again we're not even going there, in order to defeat his enemies. Whoever has the bracelet controls the armies of Anubis, who are as scary as all get out. Right, so Evelyn is having dream memories from her past life and she finds the bracelet of Anubis, which her son promptly puts on, activating the resurrection of his royal scorpioness. Meanwhile, the reincarnated Anaxunamun reses Imhotep, our first movie villain.
I'll tell you a story sometime.
And kidnaps Evelyn because... why? Right, I thought it would please you to watch her die. Also, they seem to have this weird reincarnation rivalry going on. Imhotep later kidnaps Alex to guide him to Amsheh, the resting place of the Scorpion King and his big angry Egyptian demon dogs. And now we're 46 minutes into the movie. Doing well. Moving on. Rick, Evie, Jonathan, new comic relief dude Izzy, and Ardith chase Imhotep, Anaxunamun, Alex, and Lochna, whose interactions with Alex are actually pretty funny.
Let's go to the bathroom.
On trains, planes, and dirigibles, and then there are pygmy mummies and CGI scorpions and CGI, and did I mention there's a lot of CGI in this film. Eventually they get to Amsheh, at least one person dies of greed again. Evie briefly dies because there's the aforementioned subplot with her and Anaxunamun being all rivalish, but she gets resurrected with some ancient Egyptian awesomeness.
Uncle John! I don't know what this last symbol is!
What's it look like?
It's a bat! Stop!
I know that one! I know that one!
Then what is it?
A manifest!
Which was a nice callback. The gold stick that Jonathan's been so fond of for the entire movie is a spear. Rick is a reincarnated warrior for God. He beats Imhotep, he kills the Scorpion King. No! And everyone's okay. Except Imhotep, whose girlfriend won't rescue him from the pit, and so he gets all depressed because 3,000 years and 2 resurrections and she doesn't love him 5 ever. Oh, and Anaxunamun dies too, kind of randomly, just because. Did I mention there are too many plot threads? Perhaps the things that work best are the character developments, even if they are somewhat sacrificed for the set pieces, and look at what we can do with CGI! Not much, guys. Not much. I find Rick and Evie frankly adorable together. Jonathan is again shown to be brave when it counts, and Imhotep... poor Imhotep. I said in my review of The Mummy that his subplot is all about love. But while Anaxunamun is mad keen on resing him, when it comes right down to it, she cuts and runs. And that's... actually, I really quite like that. I mean, it seems kind of contrived, yeah, but I think it makes a great contrast. Imhotep loves her. He's willing to kill for her. He's willing to die for her. But he still wants to live. Anaxunamun crosses continents and stabs herself to death twice to reunite them, but ultimately their love isn't as selfless as Rick and Evie's. Imhotep is yelling for help. Rick is yelling for Evie to leave, not just because they have a son to think about, but because he genuinely holds her life as more valuable than his. And the same is true for her, because the theme, if a theme can be found in this morass of plot threads, is that love can make you selfish or love can make you selfless, and which one it is really up to you. I did it all for love is not an excuse. So yeah, I love The Mummy Returns. Watch it and be entertained, but don't take a shot every time you see bad CGI, otherwise you'll end up blind. I promised, didn't I? Yeah. So next week we will be taking a step outside of my happy fangirl comfort zone and reviewing some movies that I genuinely dislike. Wait, are we doing The Scorpion King next week or Tomb of the Dragon Emperor? Yeah, either way, this is gonna hurt.